Hi, I'm Marika from My Creative Quilts, and welcome to part 3 of our Sew Along double Irish chain. If you've missed part 1 and part 2, I'll put the links in the comp down below and you can catch up. So part 1, I just described what I'm doing. Part 2, I talked about how I'm calculating the fabric yardages, and now I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut the fabric. I use my mat sometimes as my guide for measurements. Sometimes I use my rulers. Now there are people who say you should never use your mat because it might not be consistently measured out the grid. I'm of the opinion that you use whatever's easiest for you, but you be consistent. So if I'm cutting out a quilt, I don't use the measurements on a ruler and on the mat. I either only use the ruler or I only use the mat. My argument is that as long as you're consistent, it doesn't really matter. My technique is mine alone. Everybody else can use whatever suits them. Some people don't like the way I cut my fabric. Some people cut it exactly the same way. So this is what I have developed over the last 30 years of quilting, and it works for me. And if it works for you, that's great. And if you find a better way, then that's great, because quilting is all very personal and it's what we want to do. So I'm just going to show you how I did the calculations onto the fabric itself and how I do my cutting. Okay, so this is the focus fabric for the double Irish chain quilt. It's a lovely, lovely fabric. I almost hate to cut into it. So like I said, I'm going to be using my board for my measurements, and as long as I'm consistent, it's going to be fine. Some people will cut with the fabric wide open. I don't like to use long rulers. I find I have to stretch too much and it causes problems for me. So I try to minimize the size of the fabric that I'm going to be cutting. I try never to cut more than 4 layers of fabric at a time. Sometimes I'll do 6 depending, but it really depends on how new your blades are, and there's a lot of things. It's personal preference. So when I calculated the pattern, I found that what I wanted to cut out is I need to cut out strips, and the strips are going to be 2.5 inches wide, and then they're going to be sewn together and cut again into this checkerboard pattern. The S is for the succulents, the B is for this beautiful burgundy fabric, and the T is for this beautiful teal fabric. So when I calculated for the king size quilt, I calculated that I'm going to need 45 blocks, 6.5 inches wide. So I can get, I think I can cut 6 pieces, 6 blocks of 6.5, so I'm going to have to cut 8 rows. So this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to get my rotary cutter. And so I've lined it up on the line here. It's about as straight as I can get it. And I'm going to trim off the edge. Now, be careful when you're holding your ruler. I've seen people holding their rulers like this, and when you're pressing really hard, first of all, your arm gets very tired, and you can slip. You can slip your hand, you can slip the ruler. Now, I've minimized the slippage by putting on these plastic discs, but it still is tricky if you're not holding your ruler properly. So you don't hold it like this, you don't hold it like this. You hold it, you're bracing it with your finger off of the edge of the fabric. Now I'm lining up my 1/2 inch cut here because I'm going to trim this off, and I'm bracing my ruler. You never overextend, so you don't reach farther than you can. I'm reaching a little bit more than I should be to be able to get this on the camera, but you have to be comfortable, and you're not pressing very hard on the ruler, because if you press very hard, you can also slip. You just kind of hold it like this. You're bracing it with your finger. You take your rotary cutter and you just, that's it. Always close your rotary cutter the second you're finished using it, even if you're just going to use it again in a minute. So there we got our clean cut. And I'm going to need to change my cutter soon because I've got some loose threads. So I want 6.5 inches. Always, always, always double count. I can't tell you the number of times I've miscounted and cut 1 inch too much or 1 inch too little. So we have a 1/2 inch overlapping here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. So I'm going to put this, the problem, if this was a 6 inch square I was cutting, I would reverse it and I would be using the ruler itself, but unfortunately 6.5, I don't have a 6.5 inch ruler. So there, you line up, I'm lining it up there, and then I'm going to count again just to be on the safe side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. There we go. And just line it up. Bingo. Put that aside. Yeah, I'm going to need a new blade there. And I will pull this up again. And then I'll just keep doing that until all 8 rows have been cut. So now I can cut out my blocks. So again, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to use the mat. And so I will trim off the edge. I'll trim off a 1/2 inch here. Get rid of that. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm here. And I'm just going to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a half. There, I've got my first 2. And then I'm just going to cut again. Now, people have asked me if I pre-wash my fabric. I do and I don't. I always used to in the beginning because I was told that's what you needed to do to get the chemicals out and to prevent colors from running. I don't all the time now. It depends on what the project is for. I make bags and purses and things like that. That I definitely don't wash first. These are not my fabrics, so I won't wash them first. If there's a lot of heavy reds or a lot of heavy dyed colors, I still might do it. It really now depends on if I feel like cutting out the fabric, washing the fabric or not. It's really up to you. Some people will say adamantly you should always wash your fabric. Other people say adamantly never wash your fabric. There's no never or always. It's whatever you feel like doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. Try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. If I'm cutting out smaller amounts, sometimes I put a piece of masking tape or glow tape to indicate the line that I'm using, and actually it cuts down on mistakes. It really does. And then I'll do one more here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to do that. The times I don't do that, that's when I mess up. And this is a piece, big enough piece to save for something. So there, I've got 6 of them, and I'm going to need 45 total. So then when I finish cutting all those out, I will have to cut out 2.5 inch strips of this fabric because there's going to be some in the grid squares, and then I have to cut out 2.5 inches of this. So I'll just do it the same way. I'll lay it out and I'll cut it out my 2.5 inch strips. I don't know exactly how many I need because the pattern I'm following is not using 2 colors, but 2.5 inch strips are really just easy to cut as you need them. So I'll just cut a bunch of them and then we'll get started. So that was part 3 of the Irish chain sew along. And next time we meet, all the pieces will be cut out and it'll be time to start sewing. See you next time.